Hi everyone, welcome back to Atrium Research's YouTube channel. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing John Black, the CEO and Director of Regulus Resources, which trades on the TSXV under the symbol REG. We currently cover Regulus with research and have a buy rating and $6 per share target price on the company. Lately, we've seen the shares really start to wake up, with the stock rising roughly 70% since we initiated coverage on October 1st. And we still think there's lots of room to go higher. We'll talk about some of the reasons for that share price appreciation within this call. But firstly, John, great to have you here today.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity, Ben. Good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is the first time we've had you on. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to walk the investors that don't know the story through Regulus at a pretty high level. We'll get into some other topics as well, but maybe firstly, you could touch on how Regulus came to be, how the team was formed, your past, and I think sort of the consolidation of where you guys are today and your strategy.
Okay, great. And I'll slip into a couple slides to help us as we go through on this. But my background is I'm an exploration geologist. I spent the first, I used to say half, probably the first third of my career working in major mining companies. So I started off with Bear Creek, which became Kennecott, which became Rio Tinto, and then jumped to Western Mining. So much of my career, my early formation years, were looking for major porphyry copper deposits for big international companies. That's a common theme you hear for a lot of us that work in the junior space, is that we worked for the majors before we jumped into the junior space. Many of us do that because it's a little easier for us to work more quickly in the junior space moving forward. And you have more skin in the game. You have more say on what you're doing. And if you do things well, you benefit from that as well. So that's kind of how we get started in this a lot of times. Kevin Heather's our Chief Geological Officer. Kevin has a very similar background to me, a little bit more on the gold side. So we make a good partnership. Both of us have a lot of experience in South America. And hang on, let me close that off. That should work there. So we have a lot of experience in South America. And when some friends approached us in 2004 and asked us if we wanted to set up a junior company, we were anxious to do that. Metal prices were at all-time lows. It wasn't a lot of fun working for major mining companies at that time. But when you set up a junior company, you need to determine what your niche will be, what your strategy will be. That's a very important part. You don't just jump in and grab a project and become a junior company. And so when we thought pretty carefully about it, what we do is we leverage off of our experience and our knowledge of South America, and particularly the Andean Cordillera, on both copper and gold projects. And we use our contacts, our knowledge, our experience to identify projects that have potential to become very large copper deposits or copper gold deposits. So we look for these projects that have that potential. They're often projects that have some drilling, but we see that there's much more potential remaining in the project. When we acquire these in a downturn in the market or under special circumstances, we then add value by expanding the resource, drilling it out, showing what the size of the project really is, and then de-risking it through about the pre-feasibility stage. And then we're quite clear with our strategy that our intent is to monetize it by selling it to a major mining company. This keeps us in the space that we work well in. We're good exploration geologists. We know how to operate in South America. We're not mine builders. We're not mine operators. You don't want us doing that. And also the time it takes from the discovery of one of these big copper projects to when you put it into production is typically about 20 years now, which is well beyond any of our patience for an investment strategy. So we're trying to keep this in a range from that discovery point to about a pre-feasibility, when you see a lot of value added into the project, and shorten that. It still takes us longer than we anticipate to do these, but that's the space we're working in. What I'm extremely excited about right now is that within this strategy, it's obvious that we have to be on the right project, and then we have to do our job well to advance it. But one ingredient that we can't always control is that we're delivering a good project into a market at the right point in time. And that's what I think we'll talk about quite a bit today, is We're really
Mm-hmm.
seeing a convergence of factors right now that we're delivering a great project into a hot market when it's more likely that these will be acquired by major mining companies. So these moments come around about every decade, and I think we're timing this one just right now. So within the history of our group, our first company was called Antares Minerals. We identified the Adhere project as one that fit our criteria. We acquired it for $15 million from Phelps Dodge. We spent about $45 million to drill it out. And we sold that one for $650 million to First Quantum in 2010. That was in the last big copper super cycle. That was from about 2006 to about 2011, when a lot of projects like these were acquired by major mining companies. In the decade after that, from 2011 or 2012 until about 2022 or 23, there were almost no transactions in our space. So even if we'd been on the best project out there, the chances of us selling that project in that time frame wouldn't have been that great. But during
Mm-hmm.
that time, we went out and got a couple good projects. So from the Antares, we spun out Regulus, working on the Antakori project that we'll talk about today. And then our same management team has a sister company called Aldebaran, where we're working on the Altar copper gold project in Argentina, another big copper project. We split ourselves into two companies because when we acquired the option for the Altar project, Argentina was not a favorable site for investment for most investors. That's changed dramatically right now. So our management team manages two companies. Each company has a very, very exciting copper or gold deposit. And as I mentioned, I think we're delivering them right at the right moment now.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So great. Appreciate that intro. Maybe I guess just diving into Regulus in particular, we can talk about the Antakori project, where you guys are at today, possibly what you've done over the last few years at a high level, and again where you are today, positioning the company, and also we'll get into the copper price and whatnot. But the timing couldn't be better with where you guys have set up this project, with copper prices rising, copper equities starting to move, and a lot more excitement and pent up demand for projects like this.
Great. So we'll just do a bit of a high level refresher for those that might not
Mm-hmm.
be familiar with the project. The Antakori project's located in northern Peru. So we're in a segment of the Andes that's just incredibly well endowed with both copper and gold deposits. We can see a number of the mines or projects that are identified here. This part of the Andes tends to have gold mines now, but underlying those gold mines, which are often oxide caps over large copper gold sulfide projects underneath, or just straight up porphyry coppers that are not yet developed. So known as more of a gold district now, but with potential to convert it into a major copper district moving forward. To me, there are kind of two places on the earth right now that have remarkable concentrations of large undeveloped copper deposits. One is San Juan, Argentina, where our sister company is located at, and the other is here in Cajamarca, where there's 6 big copper projects just in Cajamarca that have potential to be developed, and I think we have one of the more exciting ones of those. So if we dropped into the district we're in itself, we're in the Huaguayoc district. This is a historic district that produced a tremendous amount of silver in the Spanish days on this, but more recently it's been dominated by 2 mines. So we have the Cerro Corona mine and the Tantuatay mine. And then our land position is in the red and the pink on this diagram. So we've assembled a land position just to the northeast of the Tantuatay mine. For reference, the distance from the center of our claims to Cerro Corona is about 7 kilometers. Cerro Corona is a mine operated by Gold Fields. It's been one of their better mines over the last decade or so, but it's nearing the end of its mine life. They actually run out of tailing space. You can see the tailings facility they have here and the open pit. This is a milling operation that produces the copper gold concentrate. They actually completed their last blast last month in the pit. So they're just cleaning the pit up now and positioning it to be a storage facility for tailings. They'll continue to run the mill for about 4 years now on a low-grade stockpile that they've built up. But the production levels of the mine will drop. It'll still be quite profitable at these metal prices, but the end is in sight. With only 4 years left, Goldfields is currently evaluating what their options are to go forward. Sometimes in a situation like this, a major mining company might determine to sell the project so they no longer have closure responsibilities or liabilities on this. However, Goldfields has a very good reputation in Peru and in our district, and they're well aware this will always be viewed as a Goldfields mine. So they've indicated they're fully willing to manage out the full closure of the mine. But there may be other opportunities in here. You could imagine with a modern mill right next door to us, that could perhaps come into play in our project as we discuss what our project is immediately next door. So a major mine with a good workforce, a good reputation, good community relations, running out of ore, but we may be able to provide a solution for them on that next door. When we look at the Tantuatai mine, which is immediately adjacent to us, the Tantuatai mine is operated by a joint venture called Comalaiche. It's 3 companies. So it's southern Peru, which is Grupo Mexico's Peruvian subsidiary. So Grupo's one of the top copper mining companies in the world. They own 44% of the project. Buenaventura, the large Peruvian predominantly precious metal miner, owns 40%, and they're the operator of the joint venture. And Escrow, a small private company, has 16%. So 3 partners, none of which own more than 50% of it, are operating the Tantuatai mine. And at Tantuatai, they're mining the oxide cap over a large copper gold sulfide project at depth. So when you have a big copper gold sulfide project like this, you weather it, you strip the copper out, you produce an oxide cap beneath the higher ground, and that oxide cap can be processed with low-cost cyanide heap leaching to produce gold and silver. Effectively, what they're doing is they're pre-stripping and exposing this large copper gold sulfide deposit that is partly on their ground and partly on our ground. So we'll see that the future for this district is moving from that oxide heap leach operation producing gold to a much larger copper gold sulfide operation. But for that to happen, it's our opinion that a district consolidation is necessary to move forward. So the next slide will be as if we're standing over the top of Cerro Corona and we're looking to the northwest. So you'll see our property position on the right side and the Comalaiche property position in the mine on the left. So we'll see on this diagram a conceptual pit that constrains the resource that we reported in 2019 on the project. I think you can see the property boundary pretty easily here, right down the middle of the pit. We can show the mineralization on our side of the ground, but we can't show the mineralization on the neighbor's side for obvious reasons. That's just reporting reasons on moving forward. Let me get plugged in for power here. And but the mineralization obviously doesn't stop right on that line. That mineralization does extend across that property boundary. So hang on just a second. There we go. So that mineralization does extend under the ground. We know what's on the neighbor's ground. We just can't report it. And then you can see their mine on the surface where they're essentially taking the oxide cap off the top. We don't have oxides on our ground because we've been glacially scoured in the valley that covers the surface on our ground. Since this resource was put out, we've drilled 32,000 meters more of drilling, but we haven't been in a position to update it in this manner. Based on the type of agreements we have with the neighbors next door. So we underreport, but let's look at what we do report on our resource, on our ground. So this is the same pit in plan. So within this pit, just on the red claims only, we report a little over 500 million tons of mineralization, about half inferred, about half indicated. And that's at a copper equivalent grade of about 0.7 based on the metal values we used when we did this resource. So when we did this resource in 2019, it was $3 copper and I think we use $1,400 gold and $18 silver. If we use today's metals prices, the copper equivalent grade would be closer to 0.85% copper, just because the precious metal prices have come up so dramatically on this. And another way to put it in perspective, in 2019, when we looked at this, we thought of the project as about 2/3 copper and 1/3 precious metal. At today's prices, this is almost a 50-50 copper precious metals project moving forward. Another important thing about this diagram is if we look at this cross section and look to the northeast, this cross section's on the left side of the diagram. Once again, we can see the pit that constrains our resource. We can see the property boundary. I can't show what's on their ground. But what this diagram shows is a lot of the highest grades are very close to the surface. So we can start in plus 1% copper equivalent mineralization and with a remarkably low strip ratio. We always knew this would be a big project, and we knew it would have good, much better than average copper equivalent grades. But I think the thing that's really surprised us is, or we've just appreciated more as we've gone into this, is that this is a remarkably low strip project. So a low strip project, better than average grades, very large in a brownfield setting. All of those things tick the boxes of what major mining companies are looking for opportunities to move forward. So that's what's on our ground. If we take a look at what the neighbors have reported on their ground, you don't see a lot of reporting from the neighbors. Southern doesn't talk about this project. Espro is a private company. Buenaventura is the only one that puts information out in the public realm on the project, and it's a bit limited on what they put out. On the right-hand side of the diagram, you can see their perspective of the project, where they show our property and can't show mineralization, but they show the mineralization on their ground. And then their cross-section, of course, maximizes the look on their project, just like ours did on ours. And you see a couple points here. This is the property boundary. This is the pit that constrains their open pit resource that they report. At the time they did theirs, and the nature of agreements we have right now doesn't allow us to conceptually lay back on either side on this. So all of this mineralization they couldn't report as open pit. It would naturally fall into an open pit if there were no property boundaries here. But the bottom line on this is the resource that they report is approximately 800 million tons at similar grade to us. So if we look at the combined resources, here we show copper and green and gold in the shades of gold, and it's indicated versus inferred based on the shading on it. So on our project, we have 5 billion pounds of contained copper, 4.5 million ounces of contained gold in Antakori, our side. We can see the Tantuatai resource graphically shown the same way. And then if I combine their reported resource and our reported resource, and what we refer to as Antakori, the combined project, that's over 13 billion pounds of copper and 10.5 million ounces of gold. The biggest copper companies, the threshold that I'm aware of for the bigger ones is about 10 billion pounds or 5 million tons of contained copper. So just copper alone, this is big enough to be of interest to the biggest copper companies. And at 10.5 million ounces of gold, that far exceeds the threshold for even a Barrick or a Newmont to look at a project. So this is a big copper project and a big gold project in the same place. And we both substantially underreport right now. So that as one way just to show the level of collaboration between ourselves and the neighbors. You could think that the neighbors probably just want to freeze us out, and we kind of snuck in and got part of their project on them. That's true, but we have worked together over the years, and I think that was evident in how we can show our reporting at times when we move forward. But most recently, we've entered into an agreement where we're working on producing a mineral resource estimate for a consolidated project, as if there were no property boundaries between us. And so that'll be done by SRK Peru as an independent party moving forward. It's taken us a little while to get this set up and really moving well. We have very different geologic models and different parameters going forward, but we're well underway on that. And that will be done it'll slip into the earliest part of next year but it's quite soon when that'll be finished. It's important to note that when we have that mineral resource estimate done, we're not allowed to present that to other parties or to present it publicly unless we have mutual agreement with the neighbors to allow us to present confidential information. I'm quite confident that the neighbors will allow us to present this to interested parties under confidentiality agreements. I don't think they will probably allow us to present it publicly. So, but having said that, I'd love to be able to get this out to the public. But having said that, it's
Hmm.
still very valuable for us to do this exercise because it helps us understand how big the pie is and what each of us have moving forward. So you can imagine in this scenario, it would be logical that there could be considerations of various ways to consolidate, various ways to move forward. But it's important that we know who has what portion of the prize here
Yep.
to move forward. And so this exercise is accomplishing that already. And it makes it easier for interested parties to review the project. Now parties can sign a confidentiality agreement with us and they can sign one with the neighbors, but then they get two big piles of information done in various different formats and they have to put it all together. And every major mining company has the capacity to do that, but it's several man months, many man months of work that they have to dedicate to do that. And not all of them do that. So by having this prepared, we will be able to present the full potential of the district to a wider audience, which is important for our strategy to move forward. So
Right.
so that's really where we're at with the project right now. We're working hard on getting this last little piece together. Um, as I said, I would have liked to have had this done quite some time ago. But we are getting there right now. And sometimes these delays, even though they're
Yep.
frustrating to all of us, is particularly on a low information project like this, sometimes there's a slight blessing in disguise because we'll be delivering this new information right into a point in time when we're seeing the metal prices rise dramatically. We're seeing the mines next door to us more clearly run out of ore and become more acutely aware of that. We're seeing the federal government and the provincial government concerned about the gold mines reaching the end of their natural mine life and wondering what they can do to promote the development of new long life copper mines. So I think we're really seeing kind of a wonderful convergence of a lot of these factors,
Yep.
and which is what has me excited about the upcoming year here.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that overview, John, and for anyone else that is looking to get a bit more information into the nitty-gritty, you can find a lot more information, of course, on Regulus's website as well as in our initiation report at atriumresearch.ca. But John, I guess just looking at a bird's eye view, it does align with what you just said in terms of the copper price starting to do well, major mining companies, not having major discoveries over the last 10, 15 years, um, getting desperate for big projects like this. Maybe you can just touch on, firstly, the rising copper prices and then the overall landscape from the major producers, the type of people that could acquire, um, you know, Regulus's asset, but the combined asset, which is a multi 10 plus billion pound resource and even 10 plus million ounces, which is crazy to say on the gold side. But maybe you can touch on that landscape and then we can pivot into the Peru local discussion as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm on record over the last couple of years of saying I think next year is the year. So I do I've genuinely thought beginning 2 years ago that we were approaching a point where the necessity for more copper is becoming so obvious that copper prices would be rising. It's taken longer to get there than I thought.
Yep.
But I think we're finally there. And they're in for the major copper companies or any major mining companies, there's a concept of an incentive price. And that's the price that's necessary to motivate major mining groups to make the decision to build new mines. And even though at $4 or $4.50 that seemed like a pretty good copper price, keep in mind that prices to build mines have come up and prices to operate mines have come up as well. So what we've been hearing over the last couple of years from the major miners is that $5 is more typically the incentive price. So, and more commonly put is a sustained price above $5 to motivate groups to build new mines or buy new mines. So in the M&A space, we actually think M&A started a couple of years ago, and it has followed a fairly predictable pattern where you see it first companies buy producing resources, particularly when they were undervalued in, say, 2022, 2023. So copper groups
Yep.
with foresight predicted that they'd see this rise in the prices, and they picked off producing assets cheaply. Those assets are hard to find now, and they're not cheap anymore. So there's not much motivation for people to do that. Then we entered a stage where they all do this funny courtship where they're trying to buy each other and merge to get bigger. Both of those activities can make an individual company have more total copper, but it doesn't produce new copper. It doesn't solve the looming shortage on this. And so as an M&A cycle matures, which I think is what we're finally hitting right now, is when you start to see companies make decisions to build new mines. And then you look at groups of companies, we kind of separate them into two groups. Some companies have those projects that they can develop into mines already in their books, and they don't need a new project. Others that might want to build a new mine who don't have the opportunity themselves have to buy it to build it. And that's what we hope to provide opportunities. So we go through and rank, and there are various banks that interact with us that help us rank companies into whether they're a likely acquirer or they're likely to stand pat with their own projects. So just in our immediate neighborhood, for example, a group like Southern Copper, who owns a portion of the project next door, they have plans to nearly double their copper production in the next decade or 15 years. But they have an abundance of projects of their own that they can build to go. Just in Peru, there are probably 6 multi-billion-dollar investment opportunities for them to improve their copper production between projects to develop and expansions of existing mines and an expansion of their smelter. So they're not likely to go out and acquire other projects. They don't need to. They have their own. But there are other companies, I won't go into specific names, that just don't have those opportunities in hand, and we characterize as more likely to be aggressively looking to acquire projects. And we're seeing those companies become much, much more active. And they include the traditional copper companies and gold companies, since this project has both right now. And the big gold companies increasingly would like to have more copper for 2 reasons. One, it's a nice hedge, but also as they become bigger, it's kind of hard to continue to grow with gold mines only. The really big long life projects tend to be the big copper or copper gold projects. So a project like this that has potential to be a 30 or 50 or 100-year mine life is very attractive to groups like that. We're also seeing the emergence of this kind of non-traditional groups. The Chinese companies are back and buying projects right now. They bought a lot of projects in Peru and elsewhere in that period from 2006 to 2011 at the development stage. Then they laid off for 10 or 12 years. But all of a sudden they're back right now. And we can see that just in the past few weeks. We see Jiangxi moving on Sol Gold. We've seen China Moly pick up the Lumina Gold project in Ecuador recently. We've seen reactivation of projects, development projects held by the Chinese, like Rio Blanco with Xinjiang, very close to us in Cajamarca. Also, China Minmetals and Jiangxi are reactivating their Galeno project. So we're seeing them come back into the earlier stage development stage of projects, which is great news to see. We're seeing interest out of the Middle East, a lot of money that wants to rotate out of petroleum production and move into the mining space. And we're seeing a lot of sort of geopolitical tensions now as North American companies or European companies or countries even are pivoting to protect supply sources versus the Chinese and others. And so it's all of this creates competition and creates anxiety, which is exactly what we want. when we have a project like this. We want
Yeah,
more people
some
getting
emotion.
nervous about whether they're going to land on a project or not. So
Yeah,
I think we're finally beginning to see that. Until 3 months ago, I could only really point to BHP's acquisition of Filo as in our space, and suddenly we're seeing more happening, and I have the sense that we're right on the cusp of even more happening.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, it's funny. You just went through the whole sort of track of what we talked about in our initiation in terms of how these companies go downstream eventually, but it takes a while to get there. And I think one thing to note as well is that, you know, rising copper prices, why does that happen? You know, more demand than there is supply. Okay, well, how do we get more supply? And it's not by acquiring other producers, it's by actually building these projects. But lucky for you, lucky for investors, maybe not users of these metals, but investors, is that these mines will take 5, 10, 15 years before they're actually producing. And so there's going to be a huge window there for a long time um, before we see, you know, that supply actually come back online and start to balance out this these rising metal prices. Um, so I
That's
guess,
if I can interrupt there for just a bit.
please.
Specifically with our project, that's one of the reasons we really like the brownfield setting.
Yep.
Because when you have a greenfields project, of which there are several around us in northern Peru, it takes a lot longer to get one of those. Then you're talking probably 10 plus years in many
Yep.
cases, no matter how optimistic you are on this. But if you already are in a mining district, you already have communities that depend on employment and provision of services, particularly if they're faced with the local mines closing, but an opportunity to build a new mine. It's easier to envision a more rapid pathway to getting a project developed. So I think
Yep.
that's what I really like about our project is I think it's one that if you look at it carefully, you could easily envision having it being developed quite a number of years sooner than other great projects that are more greenfields in nature.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of the perfect storm from many different angles, right? The Goldfields mine winding down, pre-stripping on the other half of your deposit, you not having much stripping to do, high grade at surface, and then the community, of course. And I think what people also should realize is that this isn't, you know, 8 years of employment for the local community. This could be 80 years or 50 years. You know, this is a generational size, potentially a generational operation. So that also would be quite um, valuable from both the surrounding community as well as the government's perspective. So I guess that does sort of lead into Peru, and you have touched on a few points here, but maybe you can talk about um, Peru in general from a political standpoint, you know, why you guys believe that this is the country that you can develop a project like this, that a large major would come in and be happy to spend a lot of money developing a project like this, and then maybe even just regionally, what else is happening in the area that gives you some confidence going forward here?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we set up more than 20 years ago, we kind of envisioned we could work anywhere in the Andes. We had experience in every country up and down the Cordillera, and we've always kind of gravitated to Peru, and to us it's a balance of there are countries where it might be easier or safer to work in, but that are very well worked. For example, Chile would be a good case where Chile, it's been easy to work there, and it's harder to find a project because it's more explored, and
Right.
much of the ground is held by majors, and it's just hard to get in on that. You can go more frontier, say Colombia or Ecuador or Argentina 10 years ago, and you were taking more risk. There was a
Yep.
good chance of finding something, but then if you found it, could you develop it or could you convince somebody that it could be developed so they'd take it from you? And that seemed to be going too far in that. And Peru always seems to have that best balance of we still feel there's a very good chance of finding new projects there. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you find the project, it's a mining country. And even though there are challenges in Peru, as most investors know, there a lot of the highlands are occupied by people, so you're interacting with groups, you're needing permissions to move forward. The permitting has become a little bit clumsy and extensive at times on this. But despite that, despite multiple changes in presidents and even political leanings of presidents over the last 10 or 15 years, there's still been quite a number of new mines
Yep.
developed during that period of time. So you see major projects announced every couple of years, independent of whoever's president going forward. I don't mean to make it sound easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's clearly they have a track record of building new mines going forward, which gives people confidence that you can do that. And so, we're facing another election coming up right now. It'll
Yep.
be interesting to see. I commonly get asked the question, if there's an election coming up, does that mean nobody will do anything for a little while? We see a couple different camps on that. Some groups view it as maybe there's a little less competition and they could act during that period of time, and while others might be frozen up on things, others might choose to wait to be certain. We're quite close to having it resolved anyway. The election will be in April with a runoff in May or June, and a new president assuming in July. So we'll know who the new president is not long from now.
Yep.
There are a lot of candidates right now. All of them recognize that mining is important to the country. So there may be a little bit of noise over the next few months. That's kind of common when we go into an election cycle like this. It's not slowing down groups from reviewing us and taking a look at us right
Yep.
now. And
Yep.
and we're not pens down until that election occurs by any means at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of the overall countrywide setting, and why we like the geology and why we like to work in Peru. When we drop more specifically into Cajamarca, we've already touched on how it's got this wonderful endowment, but to date it's been mostly the gold mines that have been developed, and now we see this plethora of big copper opportunities going forward. The amount of copper in Cajamarca that's ready to be developed is eye-opening on this, and
Mm-hmm.
that's
I
not
see your
lost.
excitement there.
Yeah, that's not lost by government authorities moving forward. And at many levels in the Peruvian government right now, they're pushing for the development of more projects. They used to talk a lot about, in their wildest dreams, overtaking Chile as being the number one copper producer. While they were talking a lot about that, Congo quietly slipped into the number two spot, and that's a little bit embarrassing for Peru right now.
Right.
So there's a lot of push now to get things developed in Peru, and they're seeing what will probably happen in Argentina now with a change of um, fiscal policies to
Yep.
incentivize a large foreign development investment to produce new mines. And they're seeing how all of a sudden Argentina is the talk of the town in terms of new projects coming forward. They realize that potential is in Peru, and particularly in the north in Cajamarca. So there's a lot of political push to go forward, which is great. Doesn't Like I said, it doesn't make it mean it's absolutely easy, but it certainly helps that there are a lot of groups that realize the potential for this to move
Yep.
forwards.
Yep.
So
Yep. No.
that kind of sets it in. All of these copper projects are reactivated now. Many of them have been
Mm-hmm.
dormant for a while. Every one of them is seeing quite a bit of work right now and moving forward. And almost all of them are already held by the group that will develop them. So we're
Right.
one of the few opportunities for a group that wants to get in and participate in the development of one of these big projects is
Mm-hmm.
to assume our position.
Right, right. No, absolutely. And like you said, a few small changes and pushes from the government can make a massive difference from an attractiveness standpoint, I guess, on the asset itself. So I do appreciate that overview, John. And I guess just to bring it back to Regulus in particular, going forward, you've already got the collaboration agreement in place. The combined mineral resource is under works with publication to you guys, at least for now, um, early in Q1. And again, unlikely that that will be reported to the public, but what is important is that ultimately you guys are trying to build this to a point where it can be sold, and when investors in the company could see that, they're able to see the true value of this project and really do their proper due diligence for a potential acquisition. I guess, is there anything that I missed in terms of what is sort of coming in the pipeline for you? I do understand you're not drilling or exploring right now, or much work is going on site.
We're not drilling anymore right now. The feedback we get from groups that have reviewed the project in quite serious depth in many cases, no one asks for us to find more
Yep.
mineralization now. And the type drilling we would do to the north, when we look at it coldly, it would be in year 50 of the mine life. So it doesn't
Yep.
change your MPV. It doesn't make the project more attractive. It burns cash and dilutes our
Yep.
shareholders. So it doesn't make much sense. The feedback we get is that it'd be great if we're buying surface lands, if we're entering into stronger agreements with communities, if we're
Mm-hmm.
doing the type of work that may be easier and cheaper for us to do as a small company. You could imagine if our neighbors or someone else came in and consolidated the district and started talking about the big project,
Yep.
property prices go up, agreements, everybody wants the mine, but everybody wants a piece of the mine too.
Right.
And so so then that once you've revealed that, it can go. So that's the type of work that we're being asked to do. Doesn't make reportable information for people to see. It's
Yeah.
quiet. We're not going to tell the world we're buying surface lands. That drives the price up. So it's kind of quiet work in the background on that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's important that that goes forward. And there are a lot of discussions between ourselves and the neighbors on the best way to do that and how to move things forward. There are some challenges in Peru right now, as in many parts of the world, that there's informal mining or illegal mining that's happening in a lot of places like that. And some of the best ways to protect yourself from that is owning the surface lands and expanding the footprint
Right.
of where you have total control of both subsurface and surface moving forward. So there's a lot of coordination between ourselves and our neighbors as we protect the district and protect the opportunity to go forward on it.
Right.
Part of that agreement, and once we have the mineral resource estimate done, there will be a decision on whether we collaboratively move to a PEA on the project as well. And so that if we make that decision to go forward, that would be something we can announce to the public that we're
Yep.
moving that way. Many groups that are evaluating us effectively already do that themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be nice for us to move that direction, but I don't think it's essential that we do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, absolutely makes sense. And I think that's where investors, they can look at the team, they can look at the track record, they can see what you've done over the last number of years, they can look at the asset, everything you just explained here, all of the macro things we discussed that set the company up, and then effectively they sit and wait, and you don't need to
Yeah.
look at the drill results every 2 weeks and things like that. It's here it is, here's the asset, here's what's presented, and then the big companies that are doing more due diligence and are much smarter than myself can really get into the nitty gritty and see where the value lies. And then we've seen transactions over the last couple of years that are at material premiums to the current share price of whatever it is, whatever company it was that was required. And I imagine something like that can happen with Regulus, if and when that time comes, especially given where the market is, the copper prices, the gold prices as well. Everything's really heating up here. So with that, John, I guess we've covered most of what I wanted to get through today. Were there any closing remarks you wanted to end on?
No, I think we've really kind of covered it. I think we've all been patient as investors and working forward, but I think we're finally moving into it. And while I was kind of quietly waiting for that copper price to do, I think this phenomenal move in the gold price may be what's really
Yep.
pushing things up here as well too. So
Certainly helps. And
I think we'll all should get a little bit of rest over the holidays and spend some good time with family and get ready for a pretty active 2026 coming up here.
absolutely. And I think, like you said, everything takes longer than you think. And that was even with the gold price, right? Everyone was, oh, gold should be here, but it's not. And then finally it starts moving, and it's really started moving. So who knows what could happen with copper even going forward here. There could be more upside. But with that, again, John, thank you for walking us and the listeners through the story. Certainly looking forward to 2026 and all is to come. And for our followers, if you haven't seen our research on Regulus, you can find it on our website at atriumresearch.ca. And again, John, thanks for the time.
Great. Thanks, Ben.